The war is over, or so they thought. The war had lasted for over a century. The Valkor Dominion and the Xyphos Union had fought across the stars, leaving entire planets in ruins. Millions had died. Armies had risen and fallen. But now, it was over. The Valkor had won. The battle in Sector 19 had been the final confrontation. The Xyphos had thrown everything they had into one last desperate attack. But it had not been enough. Their fleets were crushed, their warships broken. Their homeworld had surrendered. Their leaders were either dead or in chains. The Valkor commanders celebrated their victory, broadcasting the news across the galaxy. "The war is finished," declared Admiral Zorak, leader of the Valkor fleet. His soldiers cheered. His officers laughed. It was over. But then, something unexpected happened. A new fleet appeared on the edge of the battlefield. A ghost fleet. The Valkor sensors picked up dozens of ships emerging from the void of space. They were dark, silent, their hulls reflecting no light. Their energy signatures were unfamiliar. They had not been part of the war. They had never been seen before. The bridge of the Valkor flagship, Dominance, was filled with confusion. Officers rushed to scan the newcomers. Data flooded the screens. "Unknown ships detected," reported Tarkin, the tactical officer. "They don't match any known Xyphos or Valkor designs." Admiral Zorak narrowed his reptilian eyes. "Who are they?" No one had an answer. A signal came through, a transmission from the unknown fleet. The bridge fell silent. "Put it on screen," Zorak ordered. The main display flickered, and a figure appeared. A human. Zorak's scaly brow furrowed. Humans. They were a minor race, insignificant. Their colonies were small, their technology outdated. They had never been a part of this war. Yet here they were. The human spoke in a calm, steady voice. "This war was never yours to end." The words sent a chill through the Valkor officers. Admiral Zorak leaned forward, his claws tapping against his armrest. "Human vessel, identify yourself," he commanded. The human simply stared at him. Then the transmission cut off. A threat or a joke? The bridge erupted into noise. Officers argued, confused. "They're bluffing," scoffed Commander Relos, Zorak's second in command. "Humans don't have a fleet like this." Zorak nodded. Agreed. They lack the strength to challenge us. But Tarkin hesitated. "Sir, I recommend caution. Their fleet is unusual. We have no record of ships like these." Zorak waved a hand. "It doesn't matter. We will send a warning shot. Let them know they are trespassing in Valkor-controlled space." The Dominance charged its primary cannons. A warning blast was fired towards the human fleet. A bright beam of energy sliced through space, aiming to miss by a safe distance, just enough to scare them. But before the shot could even reach the human ships, it vanished. The energy dispersed, as if swallowed by nothingness. On the bridge of the Dominance, every officer froze. "What just happened?" Commander Relos whispered. Tarkin's fingers flew over the controls. I don't know. The energy was absorbed. It didn't hit anything." Admiral Zorak's jaw tightened. Something was wrong. The silent fleet moves. Before the Valkor could react, the human fleet began to advance. Their ships moved in perfect synchronization, their formation flawless. No radio chatter, no visible weapons, yet they came forward with absolute confidence. Panic spread through the Valkor ranks. This was not the behavior of a weak species. Zorak clenched his fists. "Prepare all weapons. If they want to fight, we will give them one." His officers scrambled, locking onto the approaching ships. The Valkor had just won a war against the Typhos. Crushing a few humans would be easy. But then, the sensors blared again. More human ships appeared. Hundreds, thousands. They were everywhere, emerging from hyperspace, rising from behind moons, lurking in asteroid fields. It was not just a fleet. It was an invasion force. And yet, not a single shot had been fired. The final warning. Another transmission came through. The same human appeared, his face calm. "We will say this once," he said. "Stand down. The war is not yours to end." The line cut off again. Admiral Zorek's heart pounded. His officers looked to him for orders. For the first time in his long military career, he did not know what to do. The war had ended, but something far worse had just begun. The arrival of the human fleet. Admiral Zorek's claws tapped against the armrest of his command chair. His mind raced. Thousands of human ships had appeared. They had never been part of the war. No one had taken them seriously before. Yet now, they stood against the Valkyr, without fear. Silence filled the bridge of the Dominance. Every officer stared at the fleet outside, waiting for orders. Zorek gritted his teeth. He was not afraid of humans. They were nothing but an insignificant species. This was a trick, a bluff. "Commander Relos," Zorak growled, "send them another message. Demand that they identify themselves." Relos nodded and sent the transmission, but no response came. Instead, the human fleet continued to advance. "Weapons online. They are ignoring us," Tarkin said, his voice uneasy. Zorek's patience snapped. "Enough of this. All ships, power up weapons. Prepare to fire." The Valkyr warships obeyed. Energy cannons hummed to life. Missiles locked onto targets. Fighters launched from carriers, forming defensive lines. The humans did nothing. They did not adjust their formation. They did not react to the Valkyr preparing for battle. They simply kept moving forward. The first shot. Zorak snarled. "Fire." The Valkyr fleet unleashed a devastating volley. Plasma bolts, ion blasts, and kinetic rounds roared through space, cutting toward the human ships. But just like before, they vanished. The weapons disappeared mid-flight, absorbed by some unseen force. The human ships remained untouched. Not a single one was damaged. The bridge of the Dominance fell into stunned silence. Tarkin's hands trembled over his controls. That's impossible. Zorek's mind struggled to process what he had just witnessed. How? Before he could demand an answer, the humans finally moved. Humanity strikes back. The first human warship flickered, its dark hull shifting. Then, without warning, a single beam of light shot from its core. It struck a Valkyr cruiser. The ship vanished instantly. No explosion, no wreckage. It was simply gone, erased from existence. On the bridge of the Dominance, officers gasped in horror. What kind of weapon is that?" Relos whispered. Before anyone could answer, the human fleet opened fire. Beams of silent, white energy sliced through the Valkyr lines, erasing ships with surgical precision. One by one, entire warships disappeared, as if they had never existed. The Valkyr fleet collapsed within minutes. The Valkyr panic. Alarms blared. Officers shouted over each other. The mighty Valkyr war fleet, victors of a century-long war, was being annihilated in seconds. Zorak gripped the arms of his chair. All ships retreat. Now. The Valkyr ships turned, trying to escape. Engines flared, hyperdrives charged. But the humans were faster. More beams fired. More ships vanished. Zorek's blood ran cold. He had never feared another species before. But now, watching his fleet die without a fight, he understood true fear. The humans had not come to negotiate. The humans had not come for territory. The humans had come to end the war, on their own terms. The final message. Another transmission came through. The human admiral's face appeared again. Calm. Unshaken. "You were warned." The signal cut out. Zorek's hands trembled. This was no longer a battle. It was a message, and the entire galaxy was watching. Humanity's unexpected strength. The Valkyr fleet was in chaos. Admiral Zorek's warships, once the most feared in the galaxy, were now running for their lives. The human fleet had barely moved, yet they were unstoppable. Zorek clenched his fists. This wasn't possible. The Valkor had fought for centuries, crushed empires, and dominated every species they encountered. But now, they were losing. No, they weren't even fighting. The humans were erasing them like insects. Valkor command falls apart. Shields at maximum, Commander Relos shouted. Shields are useless, Tarkin cried back. Their weapons don't damage ships, they just delete them. On the view screen, another Valkor battleship disappeared in a silent flash of white. Zorak's tail flicked in agitation. There has to be a weakness. Find it. But there was none. The humans weren't just powerful, they were beyond comprehension. The Typhos send a message. Suddenly, an alert flashed on the Dominance's main console. A transmission, Relos asked. Tarkin looked confused. From the Typhos. Zorak scowled. The Typhos had been defeated. Their fleets were in ruins. Their homeworld had surrendered. What could they possibly want? Put it through, he ordered. A battered Typhos officer appeared on screen. His blue skin was scorched, and behind him, his ship's bridge was in flames. Valkor commander, the Typhos officer gasped, struggling to speak. We don't have time. We tried to warn you. Zorak's eyes narrowed. Warn us about what? The Typhos officer coughed. Humanity. You thought they were weak. We did too. Zorak growled. Then why are they attacking you as well? The officer's expression darkened. Because this war was never ours. It was theirs. The transmission cut off. The Typhos ship exploded moments later. The truth about humanity. Zorak sat completely still. His officers watched him, waiting for orders. For the first time in his career, he had none. What did the Typhos mean? This war was theirs. Had humanity been waiting? Watching? His mind raced. The Valkor had always ignored humans, thinking them weak. But what if they had been something else entirely? Something far worse. Human fleet locks on. A warning alarm blared. Sir, Tarkin shouted. They're targeting us. Zorak's heart pounded. Evasive maneuvers. Now, the Dominance turned hard, engines roaring. Other Valkor ships scattered, trying to escape. But then, the human ships finally moved. They weren't just attacking randomly anymore. They were hunting. Ships vanished one by one, erased without a trace. Zorak clenched his jaw. Send a distress signal to the High Command. Tell them. A new transmission interrupted him. The last warning. The human admiral appeared again. Calm, collected, unstoppable. You never understood, did you? The human said. Zorak growled. Understood what? The human's expression didn't change. This war was never about you. We simply waited for you to end it yourselves. You failed. The transmission cut off, and the human fleet prepared to fire again. The truth about humanity's role. Admiral Zorak's scales felt cold. He had commanded battles across the stars, crushed entire civilizations, and wiped out enemies without hesitation. But never, not once, had he felt this kind of fear. Humanity had waited for the war to end. They had watched as the Valkor and Typhos slaughtered each other for over a century, and now they had decided to step in. But why? Zorak's claws gripped the command chair. Get me answers. What are they? How do they fight like this? Tarkin's screen flickered as he pulled up data. His face went pale. Sir, I don't think they're using normal weapons. Zorak growled. Explain. Tarkin hesitated. Our weapons rely on energy impact, kinetic force, or explosive yield. Their weapons don't. Zorak narrowed his eyes. Then what do they use? Tarkin swallowed hard. Sir, their attacks don't destroy matter. They remove it. Silence filled the bridge. Commander Relos's voice was hoarse. Are you saying those ships aren't dead? They're just gone. Tarkin nodded slowly. A forgotten morning. Zorak's mind raced. He had heard stories before, long ago, Before the war started, his ancestors had dismissed an ancient warning. It was an old legend, a prophecy spoken by the first explorers who had ventured into deep space. There are watchers in the dark, silent, waiting. They do not care for borders or power. They will not speak until they decide your fate. And when they do, you will never see them coming. Back then, it was treated as nonsense. Now, Zorak clenched his fists. We were fools. The humans were always in control. The human fleet moved again, tightening their formation. They weren't chasing. They weren't attacking randomly. They were herding the Valkor ships. Zorak snarled. They don't want us dead. They want us trapped. Tarkin's hands shook. Sir, if they can remove matter, what happens if they decide to remove us? Zorak's eyes burned with rage. That will not happen. He slammed his fist on the control panel. All ships, engage emergency warp. We are leaving. Engines flared across the Valkor fleet. Their ships began to jump away, the only escape. But the humans did not allow it. Before the warp drives could engage, a pulse of white energy spread across space. The Valkor fleet froze in place. Tarkin gasped. Sir, our warp drives are offline. Zorak's blood turned to ice. A new order begins. A final transmission appeared. The human admiral, still calm, still in control. Your species has spent centuries making war, the human said. You never once asked if you were being watched. Zorak's hands curled into fists. The human continued, his voice like a judge passing a final sentence. This war is over, not because you won, not because you surrendered, but because we have chosen to end it. Zorak bared his fangs. You don't have the right to make that decision. The human admiral smiled coldly. We always had the right. You just never noticed. The transmission cut out. And across the battlefield, the human ships activated their final weapon. The stars around them went dark, and the galaxy would never be the same again. No mercy for war criminals. The Valkor fleet was trapped. Their engines were dead. Their weapons were useless. Their warships floated helplessly as the human fleet surrounded them like silent predators. Admiral Zorak couldn't move, couldn't think. He had never lost a battle before. But this wasn't a battle. This was an execution. The human fleet closes in. Tarkin's voice shook. Sir, our systems are completely locked. They have disabled everything. Zorak's claws gripped his chair so tightly that the armrests cracked. He turned toward his officers. Are we the only ones left? Tarkin hesitated before nodding. The rest of our fleet is gone. Gone. Not destroyed. Not damaged. Simply erased. A final warning. A new transmission lit up the bridge. The human admiral's face appeared, expressionless. You have led your people into endless war, he said. Millions are dead because of your ambition. Zorak's tail flicked angrily. This is war. That is how the galaxy works. The human's eyes hardened. Not anymore. The transmission cut off, and for the first time in his life, Zorak felt truly powerless. The invasion begins. A new alarm blared. Tarkin gasped. Sir, they're boarding us. Zorak's eyes widened. Prepare for battle. We will not surrender. But before his soldiers could react, white beams of light appeared across the bridge. Humans materialized out of nowhere. They didn't kick down doors. They didn't blast their way in. They simply appeared, their technology beyond understanding. Zorak reached for his weapon. A human soldier was already in front of him. Before he could react, a cold metal barrel pressed against his forehead. The fall of the Valkor. The bridge fell silent. Valkor officers were pinned to the floor by human soldiers. Some tried to fight. They were shot instantly. Zorak breathed heavily, his heart pounding. The human admiral walked onto the bridge, his boots echoing against the steel floor. Zorak snarled. You think taking me prisoner will change anything? The human stopped, staring down at him. It already has. The screens across the bridge flickered. Footage played. Of the Valkor homeworld. Zorek's eyes widened. The humans were already there. Their fleet had taken the Valkor capital before the battle had even begun. This wasn't just a defeat. The Valkor Dominion had already fallen. Judgment is coming. The human admiral turned away. Your rule is over. You will stand trial for your crimes. Zorek's voice shook with rage. And if I refuse? The human glanced back, his expression unforgiving. You don't get to refuse. The screen flickered off. And for the first time in 1,000 years, the Valkor Dominion was no more. A new order in the galaxy. The Valkor Dominion was no more. Admiral Zorek sat in cold silence, his claws curled into fists. Around him, his officers were dragged away by human soldiers, their weapons confiscated, their ranks stripped. For centuries, the Valkor had ruled by fear and war. Now, they were prisoners. The trial of the conquerors. A massive human warship loomed in orbit over the fallen Valkor homeworld. Inside, Zorek and his commanders stood in a bright, sterile courtroom, their hands bound by strange energy restraints. The room was filled with representatives from countless alien species, races the Valkor had conquered, enslaved, or exterminated. They were all watching. At the center of the chamber, the human admiral stood, calm and unshaken. Zorek sneered. What is this? You think you can judge us? The human's expression didn't change. We don't think. We will. A deep voice echoed through the chamber. Admiral Zorak of the Valkor Dominion, you and your people are charged with genocide, war crimes, and the destruction of entire civilizations. A Sci-Fi's representative stepped forward, his voice filled with rage. You burned our planets. You slaughtered our families. Zorak bared his fangs. We did what was necessary to win. The human admiral stepped forward, his eyes cold. And yet, in the end, you lost. Humanity's judgment. The trial was swift. Every record of the Valkor's atrocities was displayed for the galaxy to see. Evidence of their war crimes, their cruelty, their destruction, all laid bare. And the verdict was unanimous. Guilty. Zorak growled as human soldiers approached. This is a mistake. You don't understand what you're doing. The human admiral looked at him without emotion. No, Zorak, you don't. The soldiers dragged him away. And just like that, the greatest warlord in the galaxy became nothing more than a prisoner. The rise of a new power. With the Valkor defeated, the galaxy braced for what would come next. Would humanity claim the throne? Would they conquer, as the Valkor had? The answer came swiftly. A message was broadcast across every known system. The human admiral stood before a screen, his voice steady and unwavering. There will be no more wars. His words rippled through the galaxy. No more empires, no more dominions, no more conquests. Alien leaders listened in stunned silence. From this day forward, humanity will ensure peace. Any who seek to wage war will answer to us. Some species cheered, others feared. The message was clear. The age of warlords was over. The age of humanity had begun. The final warning. The galaxy had changed forever. The Valkor Dominion was gone. Their leaders were captured, their fleets destroyed, their empire dismantled. But the war had left scars. The void left by the fallen rulers made the galaxy uneasy. Many species feared what would come next. Who would rise to power now? Would the humans become the next conquerors? Or were they something even worse? The last conversation. Deep inside a high-security human warship, Admiral Zorak sat in a metal cell. His uniform was torn, his pride shattered. But his rage still burned. When the human admiral entered, Zorak growled. Come to gloat. The human didn't answer. He simply stared. Zorak's tail flicked. You should have wiped us out. The Valkor do not beg. We do not kneel. The human tilted his head slightly. That's what we used to think about warlords like you. Zorak sneered. Then why keep us alive? If you were like us, you would have finished the job. The human stepped closer. You still don't understand, do you? Zorak's eyes narrowed. The human admiral leaned in, his voice cold. We don't need to kill you to erase you. Zorak stiffened. Your name, the human continued. Your empire, your history, it won't be remembered as glorious. Zorak snarled, but the human admiral didn't stop. No statues, no songs, only a lesson. He straightened, his expression unreadable. You won't be a legacy. The human's voice was final. You'll be a warning. Zorak said nothing. For the first time, he realized the true horror of what had happened. The Valkyr hadn't just lost. They had been erased. The broadcast that shook the stars. Across the galaxy, a final transmission was sent from the human fleet. Every species, every government, every surviving warlord heard the same message. A simple, undeniable statement. No war shall be fought without consequence again. Humanity is watching. The message wasn't a threat. It was a promise. The new guardians of the galaxy. For the first time in history, the galaxy entered a new era. Wars stopped. Empires hesitated. Old enemies sat down at tables instead of battlefields. Because now, there was something greater than them. Something that had always been watching. And it wasn't going to let them make the same mistakes again. Final scene. A quiet conversation. On board his flagship, the human admiral stood at the window, staring at the endless stars. A young officer approached. Sir, do you think they understand? The admiral didn't look away from the stars. No, he said quietly. The officer hesitated. Then, what happens when someone forgets? The admiral exhaled slowly. Then we remind them. The stars outside the window seemed to flicker for just a moment, and the galaxy held its breath. Humanity was watching, and it always would be.